Welcome to the Handyman Pros radio show. Home improvement and maintenance tips from the pros. This episode, so you want to make millions. Thanks for listening to another edition of the Handyman Pros radio show, where our goal is to help you save time, money, and aggravation. This edition's entitled, So You Want to Make Millions. To help me explain, I'm here with my ever-cheerful co-host and old buddy, John. John, what has been happening this week?
Hey, Larry. Nice to be back at the Studio South here. This week, I was out doing some work on a rental property. One of the customers that you know has a piece of property that he is renting out, and I was over there fixing a broken ice maker line. So, I just got thinking about the rental business, and I know he's got about four homes. And don't you have homes too?
I do actually. So you got thinking about it. What were you thinking about?
How does one get into rental properties, and how does one go about doing all that? So that's a great question, because it really is. Everyone has heard the horror stories of people calling you at midnight with a stuffed up toilet, all that stuff. Right, and this was an emergency.
Well, a broken water line is an emergency.
Yes, it was.
I don't care what kind of broken water line it is. It's an emergency. If it's in my house, it's an emergency. So obviously, yes, you're going to...
I thought you would just open the door and sleep through it.
Well, pretty much. But, it's when the water starts,
Yeah, just let it...
Yeah, don't worry about it. When the foundation... Anyway.
Right.
I digress. So the thing, there's a lot of misgivings about rental properties, and then there's the other side. Oh, you can make millions in the rental business, and you can do this and you can do that. Now, I am going to say that you can make millions in real estate, and you can make millions in the rental property business. It's a fantastic business. It is not as simple as everybody would like to have you believe. And so I have a couple of things that I tell everybody that asks me about being in the rental business. So there's just a few things that I start off with. And the first thing that I say is, and you've already heard me reference it is a business.
It's a business.
It's a business.
Yes.
And so, John, you've been in business for a long time. When I say that, what do I mean? I mean, what do you think?
You've got to watch. You've got to turn a profit. You got to watch your margins. You got to watch your costs. The whole bottom line, and also your nobody's paying you for your time either. So you're
correct.
You got to look at all those factors.
Yeah,
just like any business.
Like any business. And one of the other things that when we approach it, if you approach it as a business, you have a different mindset when you go into it. So you're looking. If you're going to be successful in the rental business, you have to be very numbers oriented. You have to understand there are just some base numbers that you need to understand fully, and don't ignore those numbers. Too many people say, oh, I'll make the money up in appreciation, or we can't lose in real estate. Well, John, for those of us who lived through 2007 through 2009, could you lose in real estate?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, pretty big. So there's just a couple of things that you have to understand. You have to, number one, treat it like a business. Now, when I talk about a business, I'm talking about putting in processes. Okay, so there's just things you have to do. How do you attract tenants? How do you vet your tenants? How do you it really starts before that. How do you actually buy the house? And what kind of monies do you need to buy a house that work as a rental property?
Right, and that's something that we that we were kind of talking about before was looking for a house to buy so that you can rent it out. I think there's probably a couple of tips there, and especially from a handyman perspective, it's when you look at the house, what kind of maintenance issues might
absolutely
go along with those homes, and what kind of house do you want to buy? You want to buy a brick house? You want to buy an old house? You want to buy something that's
great. Those are great questions,
right?
And they're right on the money. So if you think about it, so maintenance is one of your number one expenses in a house, in a home. It doesn't matter, and whether it's a rental house or not, it's one of your number one expenses. So, and folks, if you don't know this, I became a handyman because of my rental properties, right? Because I was doing all the work anyway, so I might as well turn around and make money at it for other people. That's how how I actually got into the handyman business. So, anyway, with that said, the maintenance side is you have to look at, there's a lot of things to look at. And to your point, John, I have a very specific image of the house that I want, right? So for me, because I'm not young and I want a single story house, I preferably want some kind of siding that is, how do we want to say it, not wood.
Yeah, something that's very low maintenance.
Low maintenance.
It'd be great to have something that was modern, up to date materials. That you don't have to fix.
Don't have to fix all the time. I don't mind vinyl. I like brick a lot. I don't mind hardy plank, although you do have to paint hardy plank. But those things, and I like single story and I like shallow pitched roofs, right? So if I have to do a roof repair, guess who can get up there?
Yeah,
me. And we tend to buy smaller houses, probably in the 1,000 square foot range, maybe a little bit bigger than that. But we have a very defined idea. And I do want to throw this out there. There are immense numbers of resources available that are free out there online to learn about the rental property business. You do not need to buy a course. You do not need to buy a course. Wait, let me say it again. You do not need to buy a course on becoming a real estate investor and learning how to do this stuff. Mm-hmm. John, you've been in sales for years. Is it when you go out and you're looking for stuff, it's like prospecting, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to go out and you get active in the community, and you go out, and if you're trying to find a rental house, it has to meet certain numbers. I'll give you the number one number it needs to meet. If you're going to buy a house, and let's just say it has to meet it's called the 1% rule, and it's not the only rule. There's other rules that work, but the 1% rule is a good general rule of thumb when you're looking at a property. So if the property costs $100,000, you have to be able to rent it on a monthly basis for 1% of that, or $1,000 a month. If you deviate from that rough percentage, and there's a few other things that go into it, but in general, if you deviate from that, you're going to end up in financial trouble, because there's a lot of maintenance items, and people say, well, my mortgage is only $450 when I do that. And it's like, yes, that's true, but you have to pay your taxes, and you have to pay your insurance, and you have to pay depreciation, and you have to pay for maintenance, and you have all the things that we talk about here on the Handyman Pros radio show about the things that you have to maintain. You've got to put a roof on it, you've got to do it. And when people rent properties, they expect that stuff to be handled in a timely fashion. You don't sit there and say to somebody, well, your roof's leaking. Well, we'll get to it, next year. It doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. It doesn't work that way. Your example is a great example, John. That water line broke going to the ice maker.
Right.
Got to get it fixed now.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? I guess from the tenant's perspective, can you give any? What kind of tenants are you looking for, and how do you know? The tenants that are desirable and those kind of things for the property, because I know that what's gonna really affect a business like this is really the cash flow of people paying on time and not really trashing the place,
not trashing your house,
because that's going to eat up a year's worth of profit.
It can. Yeah, it can.
So,
it's an interesting question. And today, we're recording this in 2020, and today it's easier than ever. Now, I started in this business really before the internet was in place, I guess I would say. And it used to be really hard to vet your tenants. That's what I call it vetting your tenants.
Yeah.
Today, for $30, I can get online. I can get a criminal background check. I can get credit reports. I can get eviction reports. I can get all kinds of information. Is all available online. It's all, I hate to say it legal, but it's all legal. It's all out there. It's public record, and you can get a pretty good idea of your tenants. Some of the other things that we look at too, just to kind of give you a tenant profile is, for example, is they need to make at least 3 times the rent. Mm-hmm. And we meaning my wife and I, we are very numbers oriented. And if we see that somebody doesn't make 3 times the rent, we know that they're going to have a hard time paying the rent, right? And general rule of thumb is what, John? It's usually like 25%, right? Mm-hmm. So you need to really make 3 to 4 times your mortgage payment or your expenses to live in a house, and that would go for your home as well. I mean, if you buy a house, you're going to need 3 to 4 times times the income for your mortgage payments and things like that. General rule of thumb.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Otherwise, you're going to be house poor. And we call it house poor. So that's a general rule of thumb. It's a general rule of thumb, but we explain that in advance. They have to have 3 times the income of the rent. So whatever it is, that's what they have to do, and they have to be able to prove it. So we look at pay stubs.
Mm-hmm.
I
mean, everybody wants to get along and have good tenants and all those kind of things. The other thing is we talked about a little bit of the exterior of the home. Brick. I'd if I was going to buy something, I'd love to have a brick house like my house because I don't like to paint.
That's right.
And what about the interior? Talk to me a little bit about the kind of floors that you found lately that would really hold up, as well as appliances and things like that.
So it's kind of an interesting phenomenon that's happened. We'll call it relatively recently. There's a lot of people now that when they do repairs, and I'm one of them. When I do repairs with maintenance in mind. How do I reduce my maintenance? Right.
Right.
So, for example, none of my homes currently have carpet in them. Mm-hmm. Because I have replaced carpet, I can't tell you how many times because of a dog or whatever. It doesn't even matter. But you replace carpet at a rate that when you turn tenants over, you replace the carpet all the time. You just basically replace the carpet. It gets really expensive.
Yeah, very expensive.
So years ago, we went to like Pergo or Click Lock flooring, and that was helpful. Right, that was helpful. We live in here in Atlanta. You can't go to tile so much because it's a little cold, and tile has its own issues too. It tends to chip and things. But the new big news in flooring in particular is LVT. It's luxury vinyl tile. Very inexpensive, very easy to put down, extremely durable, and it actually looks really good. So we've gone to starting when we're replacing flooring, we're putting LVT down right now, and so when we do that, we do that. But there's other things that we do for maintenance issues, such as interior window sills. We now put some kind of stone-based product on there. We'll either put a piece of tile over the top or we'll do something to keep water off of them because for whatever reason, our tenants have a habit of putting wet things on there and then they rot. So we have gone away from that. We also tend to pitch things so water runs away.
I guess the other question is that when I was in a couple of these rental properties, actually, first of all, let me ask you this: what was your position on people that people bring that have animals?
So that is, how do I say this? That is the landlord's choice. As to whether or not you want animals. It's really, there's a lot of choices. It's one of the things, if you want to be in the business, there's a lot of choices. Animals is one of them. Now, for example, we don't mind having dogs smaller than 25 pounds.
Okay.
We've found that dogs smaller than 25 pounds, while they can cause damage, they generally don't. And they don't cause big damage. And I'll tell you the other thing they don't do. They don't leave giant messes in the yard. And I know that sounds funny, but we had to clean up a yard one time. I mean, it was like the most disgusting thing I've ever had to do in my life. I mean, it was immense. I'm like, the house smelled that bad. And it was just because of this. It was a big dog. And this was back many, many years ago before we put this policy in for small dogs. So, lesson learned, right? Learned it the hard way. No big dogs. We don't do cats, and we don't do cats for the same reason. Well, we don't do cats largely because cats do tend to scratch more, and they tend to mark their territory. And so that is a personal preference of ours. If you're a cat person and you want to let cats in your property, that's fine. I'm just throwing it out there that it's one of the concerns is that. So that's where we go. That's our policy on pets. We do like again, back to the maintenance side on these things. LVT really lasts with dogs, believe it or not. It's really very scratch resistant. It's pretty good stuff.
What about that brings up a question. I mean, are your properties furnished?
No, we don't do furnished properties. Although there is, the Airbnb thing has spurred a lot of furnished properties. We do what's called long-term rentals, so they rent for us for a year minimum, or longer. And so we do long-term rentals. We don't do Airbnb or anything like that. We could, but we just haven't. We've never been approached to have like a furnished property.
You know, when I was out at these rental properties, one thing that really hit me was that when I walked into to do this job, was that the place was quite in shambles on the inside. You know, and so that brings up a topic, you know, from a landlord perspective. You know, what's the frequency of going by and looking at the home? I mean, I've seen, you know, the shutters are falling off, there's broken windows, there's ripped down curtains, you know.
So comments, right? So
comments.
you're talking. How do I put it? So remember, originally I said it's a business, right?
Yeah.
It's a business. And so in our business, the way that we run our business, and not everybody does this, but the way that we run our business is we have processes in place. Well, one of those processes is that we do a drive-by every month of all of our properties. Now, that's just literally a drive-by. So we drive by. We're looking for things like the length of the grass. We're looking for, is the trash taken out? Are there junk cars parked in the driveway? Are there cars, you know, et cetera, et cetera. What does the outside of the property look like? As a general rule of thumb, and we rent single-family homes. Single-family homes is a large portion of our business. We know if we go in and we look at a home and they have a whole bunch of junk in the front yard, that spurs the second part of the process, which is the interior inspection.
Yeah.
So we go in and we do a minimum inspection inside of our homes. We go 3 times a year, so every 3 months, and usually it's tied in with things like, because it's maintenance geared, right? So you have a house, you have all the same maintenance items that we talk about here on the show all the time, right? But let me ask you a question: do tenants care if the sink is leaking?
Well, that brings on another question. If I can ask you that in conjunction with this, is that, do you find tenants that care about things like that? Because if it was me when I was renting, I cared about it.
Well, and that
was me,
and that's an yeah. So we've had plenty of those we call really good tenants. You know, people we hate to see go because they do maintain the property like they actually own it.
Well, that's kind of a way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we love those tenants. Obviously, I mean, we love those tenants, and they are out there. There's a lot of people out there that do that. It's not as uncommon as you want to think, but it just gets back to that vetting process. But we do go in. You know, this all came out of the question of how often do we go in, and we go in about every 3 months because we're looking for things. So we change the HVAC filters when we go in and we do that, right? You know, again, that's something we've talked about here on the show. But we go and we change the HVAC filters. I check under every single sink because I'm just looking for the outside edge that just maybe a P-trap's come loose or something like that, and there's a little drip. You know, we just don't want that little drip. And we don't want the leak, you know. So we do a basic inspection of the house. We make sure all the ground faults are working, for example, when I do those inspections. So it's more of an inspection and it's geared around safety and health and stuff. I check the smoke alarms too because I want to make sure they work. You know, to your point, John, there are different types of landlords, right? So there are we'll call them the slumlords who they buy the house, you know, and if it's a shambles, it's a shambles and whatever. They're just getting their money. And then there's other landlords, which I think we fall into, is that we try to protect our assets, meaning we try to protect our homes. We want our homes to stay in good shape. You know, are we going to change? You know, are we going to change your countertops to granite? No, not necessarily, but maybe. You know, it just depends, right? So there's that kind of thing. That's an attitude of how the business owner runs his business. And you know what you're describing is kind of a combination of things. When we get into it, like when I get into my tenants know I'm going to show up. So guess what? They're a little bit on their toes, you know, and we're not dictatorial about it, but we do know. We just tell them, look, we're going to do a drive-by every month.
Well, I think that's a smart thing to do because that instills, you know, a little bit of skin in the game.
Well, it's expectations, right? It's an expectation that we expect you to take, you know, decent. Yeah. We don't expect it to be, you know, amazingly complete and all that kind of thing, but we expect you to take care of the property, and that means you don't do some certain things, you know.
So what's kind of the age group that you've rented to?
Yeah, that's another really interesting question. We've rented to everything from 18-year-old single people to retired couples, and all things in between. I think largely the vast majority of who our tenants are now are young couples. With no children, as a general rule.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of been where we land. We've sort of landed in that demographic. But we don't exclude anybody, to be very honest. We'll look at anybody. It's just that tends to be, our houses are small. They're a little bit farther out of town, so it's kind of, and they're affordable, I guess.
Yeah. And I guess the question, that brings to mind is that, are those homes that you have, do you have a home that has functions for disability people? Or?
So that's kind of its own special market.
Okay.
And there are people that specialize in those types of markets and the things. And again, I'm going to throw out a couple of websites out there just that if you're interested in getting in the rental business, there's a couple of other podcasts actually that I think are very much worth listening. One is called Bigger Pockets, and Bigger Pockets really goes into depth, but the first about 60 shows at Bigger Pockets will give you a great intro into, if you're thinking about getting in the rental business, that's where you can start. And the other one is Coach Carson or Chad Carson. And if you go to CoachCarson.com, he too also has really a tremendous amount of information on rental properties and on starting in the rental business. And those are two really great resources. I listen to their stuff all the time.
That's good.
Just to sharpen the saw, basically.
Just a couple other quick questions here. As a landlord, who versus the tenant, who has the responsibility for the HOA and things like that, the homeowners association?
So generally that falls under the landlord's purview. We personally will never buy a home that has an HOA as a rental. Okay. That's our choice. We do that intentionally.
Okay.
Because you have rules and regulations that you have to abide by, and it's different per each municipality in each state that you live in. So you can get all that information. Mostly your state will have some sort of guidelines for landlord-tenant relationships, and just depends where you are as far as the particulars. Here in Georgia, it's really relatively simple. Basically have a good contract and don't worry about it, and treat your people properly. As long as they're not overly restrictive in general. And HOAs, I'll just tell the truth. Our experience with HOAs on a personal basis, this is not rental business basis, has been less than fun.
Yeah, most are.
So from the business side, we want to keep it simple. We won't buy with an HOA in place.
The last question I had was liability. Whose liability? I mean, where do we go with that? I know it's all written in. We don't have to go through all the tenant law and all all the legal mumbo jumbo on it. But is it pretty straightforward? Not straightforward. That's probably not the right term. But is it apparent who's liable for what?
It's pretty clear. Yeah. I mean, we carry landlord-tenant, or we carry landlord insurance on our properties. We do require our tenants, let me rephrase that. We don't require it. We probably should, but we don't. But we do suggest highly that our tenants get tenant insurance. So they cover their own things on the inside.
So let me pause you there. Does that mean that is that also like if anything happens to the home itself, but where is that?
That is covered under our landlord policy. So if the house burns down,
yes,
in a worst case scenario,
yes,
the house burns down, our landlord's policy will rebuild the house.
Okay,
but it does not cover the tenant's personal items.
Okay.
And that's what the tenant insurance will cover. And that's the same if you go into an apartment. A lot of apartment complexes, particularly big ones, will require you to have tenant insurance because they want you to protect your own personal items.
Right.
And they work, and it's two separate insurance things. As far as other liabilities, like anything that happens on the property, really is the landlord's liability. It falls under the landlord liability. unless somebody's doing an illegal act.
Mm-hmm.
And then it falls back onto whoever is performing the illegal act.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's quite a comprehensive.
It's a good start, right?
It's a good start to rental.
It's a good start, yeah. And
like make $1 million.
Well, you can make millions in the rental business,
yes,
but it becomes a business, right?
Yep.
And it is a wealth builder in America. It's really a pretty amazing thing, and you can do extremely well. It's also one of the few businesses left in America that you can start very, very small, meaning you can start with one house, and you can scale it to how big would you like to get? Do you want to get to thousands of units? This guy doesn't, because I self-manage and stuff. But you can start small and scale if you want to, and you can build real wealth. So,
all right. Well, thanks, Larry, for all that valuable information. Hope I know the audience is going to love that information. A lot of people out there are looking at this kind of activity these days.
Perfect. Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please. It's time for the Handyman Pros radio show tip of the week.
The tip of the week.
John, what's the tip of the week? You did this on your house.
Yes, the tip of the week is...
Don't take any wooden nickels.
Right. Don't go swimming after a heavy meal.
That's right.
The tip of the week is I had bought one of these spring hinge door closers for interior doors. And I wanted to keep the basement door closed at all time. The dog would go through it all the time and leave the door wide open. Now, we know one thing about hot air, it rises.
And there's a lot of it at the Handyman Pros radio show.
There's a lot of it. But it would just, you could feel all that air just coming right out of the basement up, up and out. And also the dog would be walking in and out. Now, also, somebody who has kids... You probably want to keep a basement door closed so they don't, no accidents or anything else. But I bought a little hinge, spring hinge, and they go on the actual hinge themselves. It's about $10. I think I got it I ordered it off of like Amazon or something. But they're all over the place. It took me 10 minutes to put on. You replace the hinge pin, and you're in business. Thing works like a champ.
Door stays closed. The Z-Man no longer comes down to bug us at the radio show.
Nope. The dog is up there now. And when dog gets restless and it goes through that door, that's a one-way door now. It doesn't come back. So it works like a charm, though, folks.
Piece of cake. Good one to do on your do-it-yourself. It's a good do-it-yourself project.
Absolutely.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you've enjoyed this podcast and have derived some value from it, here's 4 things you can do. 1, tell your friends about this podcast. 2, hit subscribe on your podcast player. While you're there, leave us a review. 3, subscribe to our newsletter by going to handymanprosradioshow.com and click on the subscribe button. We'll inform you of upcoming events, shows, and give you actionable tips for maintaining your home and property. And 4, send us an email with your questions to questions@handymanprosradioshow.com. That's handymanprosradioshow.com. That's our show for this week. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week on the Handyman Pros Radio Show.